Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dhan-va-ntri Namo Namaha. Wish you all a very happy and rather healthy and wealthy, if you think so, Dhan-va-ntri trayō-daśi, known for short in the north typically as dhan-téras. It's amazing how dhan-va-ntri can be morphed into dhan, though it's understandable how trayō-daśi, which is the 13th day in any phase of the moon, can be tera, which is 13 in Hindi and many derivative languages of Sanskrit as well. But if you look at the morning prayers that we say, Karagre Vasate Lakshmi Karamadhye Saraswati Karamule tu Gaurihi, the root of it all is Gaurihi, which stands for health. Only if you have good health, you can have good education, knowledge and wisdom. And only if you have both good health and the wisdom that comes out of being healthy, you can earn wealth in the sense that you are aware of. So in this true sense, the wealth that we have has to be rooted in a knowledge-based economy, and which in turn has to be based on a well-being based economy. I'm not saying health-based, because health has been hijacked for a long period of time by allopathic systems, hospitals and doctors who unfortunately have to shell out a lot of money to pursue their education the way it is conducted today, and because of which in turn the hospital administrations and the doctors themselves in some cases have to milk their patients. But if you look at the oldest of human systems of medicine, which is Ayurveda, it's a science of well-being rather than of health, where prevention is better than cure is followed to the extent possible. And this very symbolism of dhanva-ntri showcases that. Dhanva-ntri holds in his 4 hands the Amruta Kalsha, which everybody is very familiar with, a Shankha, which is the Panchajanya, the Chakra, which is Sudarsana, and in the 4th hand, which is kind of controversial, some depictions of him, both in the sculptures as well as scriptures, show 2 leeches, whereas others show certain medicinal herbs. But the way the shlokas are ordered, it's very clear that the prioritization is that the Sudarsana Chakra, or what represents an operative procedure, a surgery, is the last resort when nothing else works. And even the medicines that are offered are the 3rd resort, only when the first 2 options have not worked out. What are the first 2 options? The second one is the leeches, which some people seem to have felt obnoxious towards and have replaced by medicinal herbs. Well, that's over time it's graduated that way. But leeches essentially represent the ability to detoxify. So any system of detoxification has to be pursued before the amruta or the medicine is given, and which in turn has to be preceded by what he has in the other hand, which is the Panchajanya Shanka, which is essentially a sound, which means that we're trying to convey to the person who thinks he is unwell certain lifestyle changes, using which the person can get back to the pink of health. So that's essentially been our system, where money making was not the prime concern, because irrespective of whether the doctor had patients or not, every village made sure that a percentage of their produce was provided to this Vaidya, the doctor. And it's very clear that the income of each person would be more if they were healthy. So, the overall income of the village or town would be larger if people were all healthy. And that became the priority of the Vaidya, where preventive health care or well-being was administered in the spirit of dhan-va-ntri. Of course, these four hands seem improbable, but hands in the sense of manus is the very root of a human being or a man or a woman. All these words have originated from a manus, which essentially means the hand. Because most mammals before the human being, exception being apes, we'll come to that later, were all four-legged creatures. And as part of the evolution, the apes were the first to climb up onto their 2 feet and therefore get a higher level of perception. You see farther and better when you stand up on your 2 feet. But are you stable enough? Well, we learned that stability. So once stability and stillness come into our repertoire, then 2 of the legs are freed and now called as hands or manus, from which the Homo sapien terminologies of human beings or man or woman comes about. And to depict multifunctionality, ability to do more than one thing, we have 2 hands. But so what if we want to do more than 2 things at a time? And that's why we depict our capabilities at a higher level of operation amongst the chakras with multiple hands, more number of hands, to show the multiple functionality. So those are the 4 hands of dhan-va-ntri. But if you look at the origin of dhan-va-ntri, maybe before that I'll talk about the Shanka, because that is the primary thing, sound advice of well-being, changes in lifestyle, etc., which ensured prevention and therefore well-being and therefore long life, which is what Ayur or Ayul essentially means. And that's what the knowledge of living not just a long life, but a long, happy and healthy life. That doesn't mean you are put under various contraptions. A life extension program is going on in the hospital. Yes, in terms of longevity, just for the record and statistics, the average life expectancy will keep going up. But what is the quality of life there? Lying in the hospital bed as a bedridden patient with all the life support systems, you call this a really worthy life? Very unfortunate. But the Panchajanya is the first step of intervention of the Vaidya, is not only in terms of giving a sound advice of lifestyle changes, moderation in everything, whether it is in eating or exercising, because we just saw a few days back Puneet Rajkumar, a great actor and the son of another great actor, succumbing to over-exercising, cardiac arrest because of that. Let's not go into the details of the medical terminology over there. It's quite obvious that exercise is useful, but either too less of it or too much of it is the problem. So moderation is the key, even amongst good things, because there's a saying, there is no such thing as a poison. There are only poisonous doses. In other words, anything when eaten, drunk, done, or consumed in any other fashion, through our eyes, what we see, ears, what we hear, etc., beyond a certain limit, very high decibel noises, for example, or too much of screen time, for example, and similarly the food, water, etc., and other liquids, intoxications in particular. All of these are going to damage the system. So it's a question of moderation. And how much is enough? Each and every one of our bodies understands and knows well, if only the mind would listen. So that's why through the sound, we are ensuring the sound of the conch. We are ensuring the akara, ukara, makara and the silence is conveyed through a pancha-janya system. Pancha meaning 5 and janya meaning born out of 5. Not just the 5 elements, bhumi, rapo, nalo, nilo, nabaha, but the pancha jnanendriyas, the 5 sense organs, and the pancha karmendriyas, the 5 organs of action that I've discussed about in previous videos in a little more detail. All of these 5 have to be brought into moderations. How much of input you take through the 5 sense organs, how much of output you give through the organs of action, all in moderation. And that's what the name of the Shankha, Panchajanya, actually refers to. It's born out of the 5, not just elements, but characteristics in terms of sensing as well as action as well. So now, let's move on to the mythical history, which is extremely important from a figurative aspect. The origin of dhan-va-ntri is the Samudra Mantra. And how does the manthan take place? It's only through the cooperation of the asuras and the devas. What am I showing here? Our own operation from chakras below the Muladhara are our ashuric abilities of inertia, laziness, procrastination, etc. And Rajas is what represents the devas. So the devas and asuras are not separate beings somewhere. They are you and I, depending upon which chakra we are operating from. If we are operating from Muladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipura, we are more rajasic in nature and acting like devas. And if we are operating from the lower chakras, out of laziness, then we are essentially asuras. But that has a potential energy and inertial force, which is also significant. Those of you who understand physics and especially mechanics will know that the inertial forces play a very critical role in all dynamic models or dynamic systems or dynamic equations. So, there has to be a balance between that, which is what is shown by the churning of the Milky Ocean by the devas and asuras. In other words, we have to get some kind of a balance between taking rest and being in action, in motion. So that balance is what gives us sufficient rest to recuperate, because every cell has a certain lifetime, much shorter than the lifetime of the person himself or herself. And the regeneration of cells happens as well, which is what the Brahma Tattva, the sustenance of each of these cells, which is what is the Vishnu Tattva, which is dhan-va-ntri, and the dissolution of that, which is the Shiva Tattva, which again are not three separate gods. When we operate from the Vishuddhi Chakra, we are creative, we regenerate lots more of healthy cells. When we are operating from the Anahata Chakra, we are essentially sustaining whatever we have generated for a longer period of time, keeping the cells hale and hearty and functional for as long as possible, whatever functions they are designed for. And that's important, that what it is designed for is what it functions for as well. It doesn't do something other than what it is designed for. This is very important in that context, because I'll finish this and get to that. Because the third aspect is when we are operating from our Sahasrara, we are essentially Shiva, the Shiva Tattva, and we dissolve those cells which have passed their prime lifetime and functionality so that new ones can be regenerated. So this is essentially our own functionality while operating from various levels of consciousness. Raising our consciousness to different levels, we perform these activities. So nothing is more important or significant compared to the other. All three are equally required. As much as excretion is important, as much as digestion. Same way, all of these are in cycles there. And therefore, just like a ball or a sphere doesn't have a starting or an ending point, every point is in fact a starting point and ending point. Similarly, these go through cycles, and you can never say which is more significant than the other. At a given point of time, depending on what you're doing, one may look to be more significant than the other. But very soon you'll reach a time when that functionality is no longer needed and you need to go for a different functionality, and that might seem very important. Our memory is short-lived. But if you look at the overall picture of a human life, or even for that matter, just a few moments in a human life, you will see all of these coming into operation. And inhalation, exhalation, and in between, retention and retention of vacuum as well. So, all of these functionalities have to be performed by specialized units. And that's why the cells which form our muscular system, for example, very different from the nerve cells, and so on and so forth. And same way, the functionality that we have of those 4 items in the hands of dhan-va-ntri have to be specialized as well. These are ayudas. What we are instead doing is using a smartphone, let's say as a brick. Well, it will work, but it is underutilization, isn't it? And may not even be as good a brick as a much cheaper brick. So, this is what has been happening to all of the tools that we have been given, body, mind, and intellect. Now, what is this churning of the ocean? The ocean represents the sea of thoughts that are there in our mind, and the Mandara mountain, which is used to churn it, represents our mind. So if there was no ocean, there was no need of this mountain to churn it. Now there is an ocean, you want to get something out of it. In other words, There are lots of goodies that are going to come out of it. So in other words, thoughts are not useless, but you should know when to use them and when not to use them, when to think and when not to think. So, this pair represents our own operation as Shiva, our own operation as Shakti. And then we have these three tools to help us out. And it is these two coming together which we celebrate as the Kedara Gauri Vrata and the dīpāvali Amavasya. It's actually a 4-day event where we are engaging all of these dimensions, 5 dimensions of us. In other words, we are not renouncing or getting rid of these 3. Yes, they're temporary, but they're very useful if you understand how they work and you utilize them efficiently and effectively and put them out when they are not necessary, especially the mind. Then they are very useful, the body, mind and intellect. But it's because we don't know that all these festivals and celebrations come up to remind us what we need to do every day, nay, every moment. So how do we go about the Diwali, for example, which is again a shortened form of dīpāvali. Dīp-āvali. Avali is row, many rows. I've written a wonderful article on this, probably already published in Katham last year, or if not, I'll do it sometime either this year or maybe next year. But the row has a very important significance as well. I'll let the article speak for that. But if you look at the rows, not just of lamps, but the row of festivities for 4 days. That is, today's dhan-téras, followed by tomorrow's naraka catur-daśi. Of course, I would prefer to call dhan-téras rather than its popular name as dhan-va-ntri trayō-daśi. That's its original name. Naraka catur-daśi, tomorrow. Then dīpāvali Amavasya Kedara Gauri Vrata, that is on Thursday. And then on Friday, you have bali-pādyami. And each of them have their significance. I'll come to them later. And it's for a particular reason that they are tuned with the astronomical system, because this dīpāvali Amavasya occurs on a day when the sun and the moon get conjoined as seen from the earth, which means our soul and our mind conjoined, not in any of the 12 zodiac signs, in a particular zodiac sign, which is Libra, which references to balance, Tula, and which means it's governed by Shukra, the creative energy, which harnesses the coming together of these two powerful perceptions through the mind and through the soul, our self, Atman, Brahman. How to harness that effectively and efficiently is what that dictates. A little more on that later. But to start all of that is the Naraka Chaturdashi. And this time, in many states of India, including our own Karnataka, it's been an extended celebration of the day previous to the dhan-va-ntri trayō-daśi, that's yesterday, was the Rajyotsava day, or the state formation day in many states of India. And the day before that was the National Unity Day, celebrating the birthday of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, the Iron Man of India, whose statue of unity stands tall the entire world today. Now, today is celebrated as the National Ayurveda Day or the Health Day. In fact, it's the 6th year. It was launched only in 2016. Finally, we recognized the importance of that apart from yoga, which we did in 2014, end of 2014. First time it was celebrated was 2015. The very next year, the National Ayurveda Day was celebrated as well. So it's been a 6-day mega Diwali this particular year, from October 31st all the way to November 5th. So coming back to today's dhan-téras, we are talking about the way in which we incarnated ourselves as dhanva-ntri. We can operate as dhanva-ntri from any one of the chakras, depending upon which system requires attention. If it is the skeletal system and the excretory system that require attention, we would operate as dhanva-ntri from the Muladhara Chakra. If our reproductive system, for example, needed attention, we would operate from our Sudarsana Chakra as dhanva-ntri. If our digestive system was having issues, I'm just giving one example. There could be multiple systems associated with it, each chakra. Then we operate from the Manipura Chakra to clear all digestion problems, be it from one extreme of constipation to the other extreme of dysentery. If it's the circulatory or respiratory system that are having issues, I will operate from the home ground of dhanva-ntri, which is essentially this. And that's why you see a lot of deaths and diseases concerned with the respiratory and the circulatory systems, because people are not activating their Anahata Chakra and operating themselves as dhanva-ntri, the king of Varanasi, Kashika Raja. And then, if it is things to do with the sensory systems and our vocal system, etc., then you operate from the Vishuddhi Chakra as dhanva-ntri, and so on and so forth. Nervous system, etc. Let's bring back the focus on to the origin of dhanva-ntri in a mythological sense. I don't like to use the word because it's something that's happening every moment. In fact, it's as new as it can be. When I said you're using a smartphone as a brick, it's okay to use an old, outdated smartphone as a brick maybe. Use it to probably throw it against somebody whom you don't like as well. But what I'm talking about is the latest and the best smartphone that you can ever buy with your budget, using that as a brick for civilian construction. Ridiculous, right? That's exactly what we are doing, because this dhanva-ntri was not born many thousands of years ago. He's born as us, you and me, every moment, depending on which chakra we are operating from and which kind of well-being we are seeking. So, misusing this aspect of preventive well-being is like as bad as or even worse than using a cell phone as a brick. Well, what is this situation then that is happening every moment? It is our sea of thoughts in which we have put this mountain called the mind, much bigger than our physical body, centered in the Agnya, but much bigger than that. And we are churning it using our tamasic gunas, calling them as Ashuras, and our rajasic gunas, calling them as Devas, and using what to churn? To go around the mountain? A snake, Vasuki, referring to our ability to perceive, our ability to see things as they are, our mystical perceptions. So using that, we are churning the mind into the ocean of thoughts to get out goodies. And yes, you will as a collateral damage, get a few so-called unwanted things like the halahala pashana, which Mahadeva, Shambho Shankara, came from the Sahasrara and got it into his system, which of course we as Parvati came and stopped it from going further down. A little bit of poison in the throat is good. As I said already, there are no such things as poison, only poisonous doses, right? So that's essentially what can come out as collateral damages. But the goodies were far more outweighing than this particular extremely strong poison, even small doses of which could kill any other living being. So what happens here is that you can still not do the churning with all these ingredients present because the mind is vacillating between these thoughts and is unstable. So to stabilize that, you have to put it on top of a kurma avatar, that is our own ability to sustain, maintain and preserve things, provides the stability for our mind not to vacillate too much. And then it can stay almost still and only rotate. Only 1 degree of freedom. And that's made possible by the snake around it, which is pulled on one side by our tamasic gunas, the other side by our rajasic gunas, and this turns around and the thoughts are churned. And out of that reflective thoughts of the knowledge that we have gained comes out many goodies like Lakshmi, Chandra, the Amruta itself, and of course dhan-va-ntri, the ability to handle our own health. So this is the significance of the so-called dhan-téras, which is actually dhan-va-ntri trayō-daśi. So once again, I wish you an amazing well-being for a full life to be lived and enjoyed. Namaskar. Wish you a great beginning to Diwali as well.